Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Tuesday, April the 25th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I'm joined once again, as always, by producer JT. JT, how are we feeling? We're like 52 hours away from the first pick being on the clock. How we
Very
doing?
close, yeah. Not great, to be honest. I woke up this morning to the fact that apparently Will Levis crashed the NFL draft betting market. So
Will Levis, the human embodiment of the Great Recession.
I don't know. We are just gonna find out tomorrow that CJ Stroud is just not gonna be in the draft anymore because that's how crazy it seems. It's insane.
It's going to keep, the market's going to continue to fluctuate, and it's going to end up being Hendon Hooker was the first quarterback off the board. It was always Hendon Hooker. It was him all along. No, it has been crazy. You're not wrong. It is definitely reflective less. I think both things are true. The idea that this draft, like, no one truly has any idea what's going on, but also, in particular, Vegas is as in the dark as the rest of us. And I think the fluctuation in Vegas odds, the market movement, has been a lot less to do with like teams changing their mind or the media changing their mind or new intel, and a lot more to do with these books are just scared to death because they have, for like one time in their entire lives, these guys setting the lines don't have an edge on the public. They don't know anything like we don't know anything.
I've never seen,
by the fact that they're all over the place.
I've never seen a sports book be so influenced by an anonymous Reddit post, but that's like where we are 48 hours or so out. Like,
no, but that's the fun part. It's like, oh, how the turntables, the sports books are as dumb as the rest of us. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. We're going to be doing a couple of minutes of Titans news topics because we've, not neglected Titans news topics for the past couple of weeks. There hasn't been a whole lot, and we've dabbled in it here and there, but as we get close to the draft, we're going to take a second, not cover the draft wholesale, consider some of the specific news items from the week, from the past couple of days, of which there are quite a few and some interesting ones. We've got some tidbits from the press conference that Ran Carthon was mandated he must do, like every other GM, at the beginning of the week of draft week, which is easily the single dumb. And there are some dumb press conferences the league makes these GMs and coaches and players participate in. The pre-draft presser with the coaches and the GMs is easily the dumbest, coerced press conference because they're obviously not going to say anything. And at best, you're going to get a bunch of lies that make the market go crazy. And that's what we've gotten. Like, I don't trust anything. You should not trust anything that's been said by a GM or coach in the last month, but especially in the past week, if it was at a podium that they were forced to be at for their job. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, we got some information at the Ran Carthons on players who are already on the team. I was saying more like, is that even true?
He did give some, he gave some info, but whether you believe it or not is up to you. But yeah, I mean, if it's true, if it turns out that those things were true, then yeah, you're right. We got a decent amount of info. But I also think that there's totally fair reason to question whether or not it's real. We'll get into all of that. And then we're going to focus at least half of today's show, maybe the slight majority of the show, will be going through our last position group of our positional series. We have the cornerbacks to cover here at the end, and it's we've kind of saved the best for last because, for my money, this is the best position group in the draft class, top to bottom, both in terms of top end talent and the depth. There are so many guys worthy of. I could have put a top 20 list together pretty easily, but we narrowed it down to 10. So we're going to talk through the top 10 guys, of which, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, I think the Titans, I'll be pretty surprised if they don't come away with a corner. And in one of those first three picks, I think it's going to be one of them is spent on a defensive back. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. JT, are you experiencing any draft cycle fatigue yet? I'm at the point where I'm not tired of covering the draft or, talking about it on the show. It's almost like when if you ever worked out in the afternoon and you get home and you eat dinner and it's like your mind is not tired. You don't want to go to sleep. My body is I'm just weak. I'm just tired. Like I'm at the end of the marathon here. That's how I feel. Like my mind is still there, but the body is slowly less and less willing.
I just want to get to Thursday, I just want it to be here. and I want to see what actually happens. Because if there's anything I'm tired of talking about, is I'm tired of talking about every single scenario. Like I want to know what our multiverse, what our universe, like what the outcome is, and then we can continue to talk about it. But like
that will inject, I think, that will inject some enthusiasm, because once we know who's on the team, it'll be real fun and easy to talk about them. We don't know, and I'm tired. I'm with you. I'm tired of speculating, and I'm ready for Thursday to be here, but not in the way I think a lot of folks confuse that for, like, I'm ready for it to be over with. No. I'm not trying to get through Thursday. I'm trying to get to Thursday. Like, I'm amped. I can't wait for Thursday night, and I'm going to soak it all up, and then Friday night as well, and then Saturday, because we're geeks, and we've gotten to the point where we're familiar with a lot of the guys that did go on Saturday too. So super excited about that. While we're on the topic, might as well mention we've got our draft live show on Thursday and Friday nights with JT. On Friday, we'll have Stoney in the studio covering every minute, every single pick of the first 3 rounds and the first 2 nights of the draft. That'll be live where you're watching this live, if you're watching live, and we appreciate the handful of you that are. Hope you guys had a very nice Tuesday, and we appreciate you being here to listen. If you want to comment, ask questions, participate in the conversation, go over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, find this live stream, and in the comment section there is where you can interact with us on the show so that we can see what you have to say. But the same place you're finding the live stream now, you'll find it on Thursday night and on Friday night. So make sure to tune in for that. We will super appreciate of all the live streams we do. If you're able to help spread that one, send it to family, send it to a friend, a retweet or a like or a share or a quote tweet, whatever it may be, that you can help spread the news on that. We appreciate that. And we'll have a graphic to promote that up by the end of today. And we'll be circulating that the next couple of days. So if you guys would not mind helping us circulate that, we would really appreciate it. JT, let's mention also at the top, before we get into the news, our article that we've been working on the past 2 or 3 days, which if you have been listening to the show religiously, then you know the topic of this, because it was the same title of a show we released on Saturday, this past
Sunday,
weekend.
I believe so.
Sunday? Okay, yeah. It's the do and don't draft prospects of the 2023 NFL draft from the perspective of the Titans drafting. Although I think if you're a fan of another team, you could read this list, and it's a relatively agnostic list. There are a handful of guys that are specifically tailored to the Titans. But if you listen to that episode, JT, you didn't get all the information. You're shy like 20 dudes, because we talked through about 50 on that show. Don't know how we fit it into one show, but we go long. We know this, so I guess that's how. We talked about 50 on that show, and our article that we have coming out tonight, it'll be up and available by the end of the day Tuesday on BroadwaySportsMedia.com, has 70 players, 35 do and 35 do not draft players, with write-ups and explanations on each and every one. And it's not just the 70 top guys or our 70 favorite guys. We have strategically gone through and picked a handful of do and do not draft players at every position of need for the Titans in every round in which they have a draft pick. So it's something that we've designed kind of, JT, for folks, ourselves included, to have the copy of this article and kind of follow along as the draft goes. It's kind of a rooting guide in a way. If you're especially a fan who loves the draft, you're not quite as up on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round prospects, but you want to know who you can and can't be happy about, who you do and don't want to see fall to your team. That's what this article is designed to do, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I think we kind of had that show on Sunday, and then we're like, let's make an article out of this. And then did those players, and then we were like, who else can we add? And we like doubled it. So like that's it's crazy, but I'm really excited for it, and I'm sure people will have thoughts. Can't wait to see what people think of the article when it comes out later today.
Yeah, and it looks great. Here's some of the cover art we've done for it. It's got a lot of cool custom graphics and images and the design layout. I've kind of been working for most of the day on putting it together. So it is not your run-of-the-mill aggregate article. This is not a something that somebody threw together for some national network that is going to pay them $30 for this article that you read and don't really learn anything from. This just for reference, JT, it's going to end, I'm still tweaking some wording here and there, but it's going to end up being in the like 6,500 word range, which is a lot of words.
It is a lot of words.
If that's any indication of how thorough this is, it is very thorough. So we're proud of it. hopefully you guys get some use out of it and can follow along on draft day or read ahead of time and prep yourself. So make sure to check that out. Again, it'll be available later today on Tuesday, and we'll make sure to pump that out on social media so you'll see it there. All right, now that we've gotten all the housekeeping out of the way, JT, and we've got some folks in here, let's talk about the Titans news, NFL news topics that we have to discuss today, and then we'll get to the cornerbacks.
Yeah, but we can't start, however, without.
Oh right, I forgot.
The warm-up.
Something you need to
let's
talk
start,
to.
Let's bring back the Hot Read podcast warm-up. Except I'm throwing it.
We need a good soundbite for that. Like we need to pay somebody on.
We need to
on
go on like Fiverr.
I was warm up.
Fiverr.
Yeah, no, we're gonna do it. It's just a matter of time. We're gonna go find somebody with a stick voice, and we'll have them say, entering the warm-up or something like that. That's what we need.
This is a very interesting question that I want to propose to you specifically, but also if people want to chime in the YouTube comments, please do. Okay. I was doing my homework like Easton has taught me to start listening to other people's podcasts recently about the NFL draft.
Mimicry is the greatest, highest form of
sincerity. And nobody,
I've butchered that, but
imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Highest form of flattery. Yeah, big words. I'm smart, I promise. All right.
Either way, I was listening to the Ringer's new podcast. I think it came out today, I believe.
Okay.
Regarding, and it was their take purge that they do like every single year, which is always fun. But it wasn't exactly a take that they were just throwing out there where it's like anything safe, like you can just throw out whatever you want to say, but more on what they were talking about. One of the takes they were doing, and it's super interesting. I think Ben Solak has done a lot of research on this, going back and seeing if you use your first round pick, like your top 10 pick on a quarterback,
right?
How many of those coaches and GMs live to see that guy get a second contract? How many of those GM and coaches live to see past the next 2 or 3 years? And as I was listening, it's very interesting that
did he do the research? Did he have a number on this?
It's around 60 to 70% of them don't see the light of day past the second year, I think is what it was.
So
was about.
Somewhere between 6 and 7 out of 10 is it coaches and GMs?
Both, yes.
Coaches and GMs draft a guy in the first round to play quarterback, and they don't retain their job long enough to see him get a second contract.
Yes, and that begs the question then here. Titans fans want to go up and grab a quarterback.
They do. Like, they also love their new GM.
They love their GM.
Coach.
If it begs the question, and the wording that they were using a lot is, if they draft a quarterback, if a GM drafts a quarterback in the first round with their first pick, it kind of starts this doomsday clock for their career with that team.
Yeah.
With this being Rand Carthen's first draft, if he were to go up at 3 and get any one of Will Levis, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson,
which wouldn't just be his first pick in this draft, it'd be his first pick as a general manager ever.
Does this start a doomsday clock for him and this team, especially with Mike Vrabel, or would Amy Adams-Strunk give him a little bit of leeway if this quarterback doesn't work out after you've gone up and used the capital to get a guy that you kind of strike out with?
That's a great question and a great topic of discussion, because that is tough to square. If you're a fan, you look at that number, and I mean that number is largely reflective, I think, less of, I'm sure there are a lot of bad GMs and coaches out there who draft quarterbacks early that they probably shouldn't, and they get fired. But I'd imagine a lot of those guys ended up getting canned, at least in equal parts, due to the fact that the quarterback just wasn't any good. Yeah. Like they may have been a good GM, may have been a good receiver.
The good like comp there is that with Baker Mayfield, like
sure.
His first name's Hugh. I forget his last name. He was the Bengals guy. Hugh Jackson. I was about to say Hugh Jackman, and I was like, that is not right.
It's very close. Yeah. They don't look anything alike. No, not even remotely similar.
Like he drafts Baker Mayfield, goes 0-16, and immediately gets canned. Like it can either bring success, like if you have a bona fide guy like a Joe Burrow, or in this case where there really isn't a guy to take up in the front who is like by far the best quarterback prospect. Like it's really interesting to see how right now people want the Titans to. Now everybody's not set on the same quarterback, right? But
they're very much not set on
the hive mind is like, we want a quarterback.
Sure.
Well, what if that quarterback goes 2 years now and isn't the guy that you want? How did the tables turn here on someone like GM? And we look back and say now, like we're saying Rand should make a statement and go up and get a quarterback, and 2 years later, fans are now like, why did he ever do that? Like, it's very interesting to think about.
It is. The first thing that comes to mind for me is it's kind of contradictory, right? Because while it would be an incredible, very, very bold, I was trying to think of a podcast safe way of putting this because I wanted to put it a different way. A very bold way of starting off his GM career, going up and putting that on the table at 1.3 or 1.6 or wherever he has to move, or just staying put at 11. But it's, especially if you were to move up and have to give capital up, Carthen would be making a very bold choice. But at the same time, I actually think using your first ever pick on a quarterback maybe makes, and this is anecdotal, maybe this isn't true, but I kind of think it maybe is more safe than a guy like Chris Ballard, for example, who's in year, 4 or 5, 6, 7 of being a GM, at least half a decade. And he's likely to pick a quarterback in this draft. And the perceived notion is like, this is last stop. Like, this is the last exit for Chris Ballard. He either hits on this quarterback, hits on this draft, or he may lose his job. There's an argument to be made that he should have already lost his job. But if Rand were to make this move with the first pick he ever makes, I kind of find it hard to see, unless it's a total disaster, like just a Isaiah Wilson style disaster. I find it hard to think that in 2 or 3 years he'd get canned. The interesting thing here is, even if it is a disaster, because like, what's a great recent example of a disaster? Zach Wilson. And yet Joe Douglas up in New Jersey is making moves for Aaron Rodgers, putting together a roster, getting to hire his own coach a couple seasons ago, getting to do all these things. Why is he still employed? Why is he still, in not great shape, but I wouldn't say he's in hot water. Like, ownership allowed him to just go make a franchise altering move and going to get Aaron Rodgers, a guy who was apparently 90% retired 10 seconds ago, to play quarterback for them. Now, is that kind of a, face-saving move for the Zach Wilson disaster? Yes, but I actually think the reason why he still has a job is less the fact that he was able to get Rodgers and more the fact that outside of the Zach Wilson move, his drafting has been very good. Like, this dude drafted the maybe top, like 3 of the top 4 rookie of the year candidates last year. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall were 2 of the 3 at least. And if Breece hadn't torn his ACL, he probably would have won. So I think how the rest of the drafting goes for Rand Carthen ultimately is the answer. But you're absolutely right, and it's a good point to make that there is some element of a clock there at the moment where he drafts a quarterback that starts some kind of timer on his tenure. Is it a hard timer? No, but it's you better not make it. If you make a mistake during the period of this quarterback, it better be the quarterback and everything else better be great, or else you may reach an early demise. So that is a very interesting question and a fair point. Dorito Lover 101. What it says, fortunate for him, Hendon Hooker also won't be around to get a second contract because he'll already be 46 years old. A good point, Dorito Lover 101. So yeah, that's an interesting topic that we may end up having to dedicate a whole show to here in a couple of days.
And you bring up a good
frankly,
point.
if they go get a quarterback, we're going to have to do a whole show talking about what does this mean for the future of the Titans franchise.
And you bring up a good point, like the example of they're picking a quarterback. The doomsday clock for them starts now is probably Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. Like their clock will start then. And if there is no moves being made, Uncle Jim is gonna start wanting heads to roll for sure.
A crazy Uncle Jim will get heads to roll.
Yeah. Let's move on to some
news.
Let's move on to some Titans news here. Talking, of course, let's kind of do a roundup on who the Titans may be looking at a little bit more in depth than some of the other guys in the field.
This is super important. If you're half listening to this episode and you're interested in the draft, tune in for the next 60 seconds because this is the only actual hard evidence clue you're going to get until we get to the actual draft of who the Titans are interested in. So go ahead, JT.
So this is going to go down who the Titans have visited with. So these are the people that they've spoken with, either on top 30 visits, local visits, or virtual meetings. So all these guys, the Titans have had more interest in than just knowing them as a prospect and wanting to get in. And as Rand Carthen said in his press conference, kind of getting to know the person. So thank you to our friend Zach Lyons over Football and Other F Words for kind of putting this here on Twitter. So the Titans used 26 of 30 visits so far, and it'd be hard to see them using 4 more right before the draft. It could happen.
Well, they may very well have already used them. Like these
they just haven't been announced.
It's kind of a scavenger hunt of putting these things together. These lists aren't published by the league or anything. You have to use your intel, and we don't quite know. And there's one guy on here we don't even know who it is. We just know the position.
Yeah. So let's start with our favorite player in the world to pronounce their name, because
I've gotten it though. Do you know it? Because I can say it.
No, I don't. You can say it first.
Mahmoud Diabate is the way you say it.
There you go. So they've met with him.
Yes,
linebacker. Also met with linebacker Utah, Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback out of Mississippi State, Jalen Duncan, Jervon Dexter.
I was wondering if you're going to go all the way down the list, naming school and position. I'm like, does he know?
No, I mean, I know most of them. Okay.
Jalen Duncan, Maryland, offensive tackle.
Offensive tackle. Jervon Dexter, out of Florida. Anthony Richardson, also out of Florida. Yes.
Yep. Quarterback. Yep.
Nathaniel Tank Dell, wide receiver out of Houston. Mm-hmm. Will Levis, quarterback, Kentucky.
Human recession.
Julius Brents, cornerback out of Kansas State, I think.
Yep, nailed it.
Cool, nice. Carter Warren. Don't know where he goes.
I'm gonna look that one up. Keep going.
Anthony Bradford. Also don't know where he goes.
Okay. Carter Warren, offensive tackle, Pittsburgh.
Okay. Anthony Bradford. Also don't know where he went.
Anthony Bradford. Who?
I don't like. There's some people on this list I don't even know.
I got it. Okay, Anthony Bradford, guard out of LSU. Okay, so another lineman.
Another lineman here, Keon White, someone that you're pretty high on, yeah.
Well, I'm high on him going in the first round. I'm not high on. I would not pick him in the first round. I just think he's going to go because the league thinks he's going to go because they invited him. But
very true.
Yes, Keon White,
Quan Martin, which I'm not sure where he goes or what position he plays.
How do you even spell that first name? Quan Q or
Yeah, Quan Martin. Next up, Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle out of Georgia.
Yep.
Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver from TCU. Cam Smith, corner out of South Carolina. This is another one that is just, I know the player, I don't know the name. Villamini Feoko is someone that...
I still don't know how to say that one.
I think he's from... It's a school out west. I know that for sure. Hendon Hooker.
I'll find it here in a second.
Quarterback from Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Darnell Wright, tackle from Tennessee. Zay Flowers from Iowa State. I like this one here.
Wait, did you just say Zay Flowers from Iowa State?
Boston College.
Negative. There you go. Yes. Okay.
I don't know why I got him and Will.
By the way, Quan Martin, we couldn't figure out where he goes because he's a guy that goes by a different name. Cornerback out of Illinois. You have probably heard of him as Jartavius Martin.
There we go. Yep. Perfect. Unnamed running back. That's not Bijan Robinson. Very nice.
That one comes from our guy Justin Mello, who the agent who gave him the information. Mello knows who it is, but he was asked not to disclose who that is, but not Bijan. So it could be Jahmyr Gibbs, could be Tajay Sharp or Spears rather. Could be somebody that we not even talked about. Who knows? Yeah. But
next up, Tucker Kraft, the tight end from NDSU. Yep. Tajay Spears, who was on this list. So the other one.
Oh, wait, he's on the list. Okay, so not him, a different running back.
Deontay Banks, the corner out of Maryland, and then Joey Fisher, who another guy that I'm not really familiar with.
Joey Fisher, not even in the PFF database. So
wonderful.
I don't know.
So we have 2 other local interviews here with Devonshaw Maxwell and
Maxwell,
and then Jeremy Lucien.
Maxwell's from UTC. Lucien, I'm not positive.
And then they had a couple virtual meetings. So Ventrell Miller, he's a linebacker from, I want to say one of the Nebraska or somewhere up there.
It's a red school, I think.
It is. Tyler Scott, also wide receiver from UC. Darren Middleton, McClendon Curtis, Mark Evans.
Or Orange School. Ventrell Miller out of he's a Gator, Florida Gator.
Gotcha. John Michael Schmitz, Jalen Duncan, Ivan Pace, Payne Durham, TK McClendon, Nick Broker, and Jake Hayner. So if you go by position count here,
and this is the important part. What positions are they interested in? Now that we've fumbled our way through that list,
and also
get down to brass tacks here.
So let's get down. Yes, let's get down to brass tacks here. The defensive backs, they've met with 6. They've met with 6 defensive linemen or edges, 2 running backs, 4 interior linebackers, 4 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends, 5 wide receivers, and then 11 offensive linemen.
So let's break that down real quick. Yeah. Of those position groups, which are you most what are you most surprised to see them interested in?
For me, it's definitely the defensive line and edge, right?
It's either that or the linebackers for me. Yeah. Those two, and it's really just because in terms of positional value, or not positional value, but positional need, right? It's like, but I think what it does tell us, JT, is that if anything, Rand Carthen is going to lean more towards drafting for positional value and not drafting for need, which the nerds will tell you, and I think this is fair. Like, that's the way that you should approach a draft. If you're drafting to fill roster holes, fill, positions, and you're not drafting more, you don't have to go pure best player available, but drafting for the best value at that position, as in conjunction with like, what positions do we need more? That's the way that I think he's going to approach this. And that's part of the reason why I expect, and I'm curious if you agree, I expect him to hit, Rand Carthen and Mike Vrabel, all the collaborators over there with the Titans, to go with a defender with one of those first 3 picks. I'll be kind of surprised if they're all offensive players.
It's definitely is something that makes the most sense, right? Like, as much as the Titans need a lot of help on the offensive side of the ball, like, Mike Vrabel's not one to like neglect the needs on defense as well. Like, Mike
Vrabel, if they're just doing value, all the value up there is like, it's that you've got a million edge and cornerbacks that have incredible value in the first and second round. So
which is why I would not be surprised whatsoever to see the Titans take a cornerback or a defensive guy with their second round pick.
Nope, not at all. I think I tweeted this out the other day. Like, there's a cluster of 6-7 cornerbacks that we're going to talk about, a number of them today, actually, that are slated to go in the second round, that are arguably first round caliber talents in any other draft. But that, there's so many good guys at the top here of the cornerback class that they're kind of pushed down because of the cornerback situation for the Titans. It would not shock me one bit for them to come up with like a Julius Brents, a Tyreek Stevenson, I'm trying to think. We'll talk about this when we get to the cornerbacks, but there's a number of guys in that intermediate second round range that I think they're probably eyeing, a number of which they've met with. I mean, Julius Brents was on that list. What other cornerbacks were on that list? They met with Cam Smith,
Deontay Banks, which would be a very interesting one.
All of those guys in that kind of range of that 41st pick. So Emmanuel Forbes also in that range. Would not shock me at all if one of those guys ends up in two-tone blue by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, let's move on here. Right before, Richard asks, do you think Hendon Hooker has a shot with the Titans?
Good to see you back, Dr. Knockers.
That's an interesting question. Do you think if he were there in the second, let's like hypothetically say that Hendon Hooker is still available at 41 and the Titans either used an offensive line pick or a wide receiver pick with their first round pick, do you think at that value, Hendon Hooker would be worth it?
No. And I wrote about this 2 days ago when we filled out and wrote in our article coming out, the do and don't draft players, one of the don't draft players that I wrote about in the first round. Granted, I thought, it wouldn't be insane value, at least in the eyes of the league and a lot of talent evaluators, for you to go with a Hendon Hooker in the second round. But for this team, who currently has 6 picks, has, in this scenario that you're laying out here, has Ryan Tannehill as their starting quarterback. The only way you make that move is if you think that Hendon Hooker, beyond this season, has starting ability, has starting upside, is a guy that can supersede Ryan Tannehill and take over for the franchise and be your franchise guy. No. And I think that the general philosophy of like, well, if you're not willing to take a quarterback in the first round, you shouldn't take him in the second. Absolutely applies. I wish in this moment I'm not going to waste the time going to find this article since we're live, but there's an article. I don't know if it was PFF or Eric Eager or whoever, maybe Ben Baldwin with PFF. It was an article I read last year that was talking about, and it was kind of like what Ben Solak did in a survey of quarterbacks from the past 4 or 5 drafts. It was really, I think it was more like a decade. All the guys, JT, the quarterbacks that have gone in the second and I think first half of the third round have unanimously been a disaster. Every good quarterback is either a first round guy or a steal in, at the end of day 2 or a day 3 guy like a Russell Wilson or a Dak Prescott or a Brock Purdy. I think it is just reflective of the fact that when quarterback talent is obvious coming out of college, it's not a guy that's developmental. It's not a guy that just happens to flash at the NFL level and be, a shocking story like Brock Purdy, for example, or Tom Brady for the perfect example. Those guys go in the first round. And when it's just a meh talent, teams foolishly get talked into taking them in round 2 or at the beginning of round 3. And sometimes, okay, Jalen Hurts is definitely an exception to the rule. Jalen Hurts is a guy that probably, in hindsight, definitely should have been a first round pick. I think he ended up going in the 40s, right? He was somewhere in the second round.
He might have been the last later, pick. I think he was the last pick of the first round. Either that or this.
That's Lamar. That's Lamar. Lamar was the last pick of the first round. I'm almost positive.
I'm not sure, but
do I have him backwards? Maybe I have him backwards. Him and Lamar both went in that area, 30, 40, 50. But
Jalen Hurts went 53rd overall in the second round.
Firmly second round. So he's the exception to the rule. But the point is, when you've got somebody in college who kind of has hit their ceiling, has an upside, the player I'm really trying to describe here is Hendon Hooker, where it's like they are not quite a top flight talent, but they are already at a point where I think that they can be a good NFL quarterback. Teams they talk themselves into taking that person in the second or the third round, and it ends up being a disaster. So if the Titans consider Hendon Hooker in the second or the third round, I would consider it a disaster. They only have 6 picks. I don't see Hooker being anything better than a backup in the NFL personally. He's very old. He's injured. Like there's a million reasons why I think that'd be a bad idea.
Yeah, let's move on now to a couple quick hits here from the Titans press conference with Rand Carton. Let's just run down what he had to say, specifically dealing with Derrick Henry and some other
We want to do a little lie detector on this? A little prediction?
Yeah, sure. Let's do a lie detector test here. Let's start with what Rand Carthon had to say about Derrick Henry, in which basically the bottom line is what he told people at the press conference was that he had not received any trade calls on running back Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's a lie or the truth?
Lie. It may be technically true. It wouldn't shock me. So, we're about to talk in a second about what he had to say about Kevin Byard, star safety, where back at the owners' meetings in Arizona about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, I've lost track of time. We heard from him. I think it was Jim Wyatt who asked him about that situation because there was some smoke there. And he said at the time, Kevin Byard's representation has not asked to be cut or traded. They've not asked for a release in any way. And while that's true, it came to light at the press conference, I believe on Monday, that while he had not asked for a release or a trade or to be cut, they did, in fact, which was a big part of the smoke at the time. And I guess he just didn't answer the question, or maybe Jim knew not to ask him this. They did ask him to take a pay cut. And you look at the number, and we talked about that at the time. Yeah, of course they are, right? He's slated to make way too much money on a team that is kind of cash cap strapped right now. And so naturally they needed to fix that contract in some way. They still do, by the way. They're like, I don't think he's going to get traded or cut, but he still is he's still one of the top guys on the team in danger of being on the trading block. He's not going to get cut, but they're either going to need to trade him or they're going to need to redo that contract. I think they're going to redo it. It may not be until the summer, but that's ultimately what they're going to have to do, I think.
And then Richard here asks, what would the hopeful return be if Derrick Henry is traded to the Eagles? Which is, I think, a very interesting question, because in a couple circles, I've had people come up to me and ask, like, what do you think about the Derrick Henry? And their first reaction is, we could get a first or second round pick out of him, which is, it's just not going to happen.
Very wishful thinking.
It's not going to happen. Maybe a fourth, like a third or a fourth is probably what you're looking at a return if Derrick Henry were to be shipped off.
When that also depends entirely on leverage. So like if it became a situation where the Titans ended up taking like I've gotten 3 phone calls while we're recording this. I've not been contacted all day long. How perfect is that? If they were to go and draft a running back and then try to trade Henry, they would have lost all leverage, right? So like they would be getting even less in a return. If they found a team that was desperate for a running back, and I don't know who that is because there's a lot of running backs out there. It was a pretty big free agent class of guys that were serviceable. And then we've got a really talented running back class in this draft class that are much cheaper, much fresher, much younger. Why, if you were a team that needed a running back right now, why would you not just try to get somebody in this draft to be your next Isaiah Pacheco on a day 3 pick? Like that would be what you should do, at least in my opinion, as opposed to going and trading for and then paying a guy like Austin Eckler or a guy like Derrick Henry. So is he still on the trading block? Yeah, I think he's been there, but for the right price. And I'm kind of walking the line here, because while I think what Rand Carthen said cannot be trusted about them not receiving calls, and the fact that he didn't mention whether or not they were the ones making the calls, like convenient omission there. Very possible they are ones making the calls and they're not getting them. They're outbound and not inbound. I do trust some of the reporting we've seen from Paul Kaharski, for example, fellow 440 network host of the Paul Kaharski show. He reported on, I think, Monday, relatively shortly after that rumor came out about, is Derrick Henry potentially going to the Eagles? Are the Titans the Eagles farm team? ? He reported and his sourcing is better than anybody. He's been at this as long or longer than anybody in Nashville covering the Titans. His sources indicated to him that they had not even talked to Philadelphia about Derrick Henry. There had been no communication. I also think, just logically, is this not the same Eagles team that went out and gave Rashad Penny some money this offseason, and also gave Boston Scott some new money this offseason,
and also gave Kenneth Gainwell like a substantial pay
Kenneth
raise?
Gainwell is on the team, so like they've got a stable of 3 NFL caliber running backs who they've recently paid a bunch of money to. Why in the world would they go try to put a cherry on top like Derrick Henry at that price? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And so for the Eagles, I can say definitively, they're not trading for Derrick Henry.
Especially if they could take like Bijan. Like the same argument can be made for the Eagles, like wanting Bijan, right? Like there's that room becomes so crowded, and the re-signing of Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell and signing Rashad Penny, who granted gets hurt a lot, but like you make a
maybe that's why they go after Derrick, because they know they'll have Rashad for 2 games and then need somebody else to run it up.
And Derrick Henry, he gets a slow start to the season, so they're gonna let Derrick Henry kind of feel it out for 2 games, let Rashad Penny get hurt, and then Derrick Henry comes in and just tears it up.
That's the philosophy that led to the Eagles putting together that awesome roster. Definitely.
Exactly. Let's move on, of course, to the big news of the week so far in Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, the saga is finally over. But
thank God. Can we just thank you to whoever you worship, the good Lord above? Like, can we be done with this? I do love that the saga is over, and yet today you've got guys like Mike Garafolo and Adam Schefter talking about how I saw a tweet today along these exact lines: the multi-day saga involving the transfer of Aaron Rodgers from the Packers to the Jets begins today. And I'm like, can you just let us know when it's done? Do we have to follow every last little tidbit of this contract negotiation? Like, I don't need to know how Aaron redid his contract with the Packers to give them cap space. And then he went to New York and he met with his teammates, and Zach Wilson was crying in the corner or making his life hell at practice like he promised that he would every day. And then he has to sign a new contract with the Jets. And I don't need all of that, man. Nobody cares. I think Jets fans are even like, can we be done, please? So yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, but I'm just glad it's over. But I am not glad. Well, you know what I'm not glad about, JT? Yet another stud quarterback going NFC to AFC.
Who is the Who is the second best quarterback in the NFC right now? Because I think you have to give one to Jalen Hurts.
Sure.
Who's the second best?
The only notable ones that come to mind in no particular order is like, okay, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, and then you get to like Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr.
I mean, like, is Jared Goff, like, after his play last year, like, is Jared Goff, like,
top 5?
Second half, Jared Goff, is he, like, the third best quarterback in
there's
the
there's
NFC?
An argument to be made.
I guess maybe Derek Carr. I forget Derek Carr's now in the NFC, so, like...
But the point is, it gets very thin. But, like, if I were to say, all right, JT, name good quarterbacks in the AFC, you could rattle off 8 quarterbacks better than the best guy in the NFC. Like, it's very easy to go Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence. And, you're suspecting, like, okay, we might be about to add CJ Stroud, might be about to add Bryce Young, might be about to add Anthony Richardson. You've already got Aaron Rodgers now in the division. You've got, I know I'm forgetting a number of these guys too. You've got
still have Lamar, you have Tua, you have Justin Herbert, you have
even the mediocre guy. Like, you get to the mediocre area, like when you think bad quarterbacks in the AFC, some of the worst guys genuinely are like Kenny Pickett, Ryan Tannehill,
Davis Mills. I guess
Davis Mills is he's the only guy I can think of that's like truly bottom of the barrel. But like when Kenny Pickett and Ryan Tannehill and Tua are your low end quarterbacks in the division, holy guacamole, dude, that is the most unbalanced thing ever. This league has totally jumped the shark. And I tweeted this out the other day. The quarterback situation in the AFC and the NFC are both just a massive pit of despair, but for completely different reasons. Because if you don't have a stud in the AFC, you feel like you're screwed. And if you are in the NFC, you don't have a stud and you just feel like you're screwed because it doesn't matter.
Let's touch on the compensation real quick before we get to these cornerbacks that we need to talk about. The Packers are moving up 2 spots to the 13th overall pick. They get a Jets second round pick, which is the pick right after the Titans in this year's draft. They get a 6th pick and a conditional second round next year, which becomes a first round pick if Aaron Rodgers plays at least 65% of games. Or snaps, I guess, of plays. So not games, but it'd be hard to imagine him if not getting hurt. Like,
he'll do it.
He'll do it. So it most likely becomes a first round pick next year. The Jets receive, of course, Aaron Rodgers. They move back 2 picks to the 15th overall pick in this year's draft, and they get a 5th round pick. Now, the big thing in this trade right here that I think is interesting for Titans fans is that Corey Davis, still on this New York Jets team, has not been cut and has not been traded. Could be an interesting post June 1st cut that the Jets make.
I was about to say
an interesting return.
The important
here.
Point there is like he's still there, and yet there's really not room for him, is there? Yeah, that wide receiver room is definitely full. They seem like the Jets, that is, seem like he's the guy. Like if they're going to let go of because he's absolutely an NFL receiver. Like there's no doubt he's an NFL starting caliber receiver when he's healthy. But they just can't not afford physically, but in terms of roster construction, they can't afford to use their 8th wide receiver spot on Corey Davis. Like they've got to make some room. So that is the only thing that really I care most about from all of this. Corey Davis could be a really nice addition for the Titans. You could see them get back, the prodigal son here. And will he come back and be a stud? No. Was he ever really a stud? Like he was really, really great wide receiver 2 when he had AJ Brown to play beside. If Treylon Burks takes that wide receiver 1 mantle in earnest this year, you could see a guy like him be an awesome wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in the system, at worst a rotational guy. He would raise the ceiling of this wide receiver room, or the floor rather of the wide receiver room, tremendously if they were to add him to the roster. So absolutely somebody to keep an eye on into the summer.
All right, and that's going to finish up our NFL rumors and news roundup. That's what we have so far. We could talk all day long about Will Levis maybe going at 2 or 3, or that's what we're going to do on Thursday when we finally find out. Because
I'll say, JT, is those tickets that I think I talked about this at the time. Those tickets I got placed in end of December on Will Levis at like plus 2,000 to go first overall. They looked dead for a long time. If they hit, they're not going to. But if they do, I'm going to be insufferable. I'm going to be rich and I'm going to be insufferable. So that's all I'm saying. All right,
let's move on to our cornerbacks here, which it's funny how we've saved the deepest class for last. Funny how that works out, right?
Yeah.
And there's
honestly better that we did this, because if we'd done this like third, this would have been a 3-hour episode. There's no way we would have kept it.
And
kept
now,
it short.
we're gonna do our best to do 30 minutes or less here. And I know
30
that's
minutes,
gonna
maybe.
be
Let's do it. Let's run it.
So this is gonna be a little bit of a kind of what
speed
we've
round.
been doing light. We're doing very much a speed round here. Do you have any honorable mentions for your top 10?
Just one. I have like 7 that I could talk about that are worthy of mentioning, but the one that I will mention, purely because I do think that he kind of fits the bill as a potential future Titan. If the Titans were to take this guy in the second round, it would not shock me one bit, because he fits kind of the complexion of player that they would want. It's Julius Brents, who is, I keep kind of juggling. He's like my cornerback 11 or 12. I don't know. I put out my final rankings probably the day of the draft, a Thursday morning. But he's right outside the top 10 for me. Julius Brents out of Kansas State. If you would not mind pulling up the measurables on him.
Got him right here.
Okay, perfect.
Julius Brents comes in at 6'2", 198, has a wingspan of 82 and 5/8 inches. Was pretty good in the vertical and broad jump, both ranked the 96th percentile and 99th percentile in both of those, with his broad jump coming in at 138. But his speed is just a little bit below average with a 4.53 40.
Yeah, so he's very much an athlete, and that's something that I think that this Titans team is going to value. He's right at that threshold where people, we've not heard from the Titans themselves. They've kind of alluded to this, but folks in and around Titans circles have kind of been saying since this past season, they need to get some DBs that are big. Like, they need some guys that have some durability to them. And right at that 200-pound weight, almost 6'3", he's got good length, got a really nice wingspan, all those things you just mentioned. He kind of fits the bill there. He's got some inconsistent balance issues on tape. Ball skills are kind of concerning. Like, he doesn't have a ton of production. Let's see, just 6 interceptions in 5 years. 5 years in college, 16 passes defensed. So, like, that's the biggest question mark / area of concern for him at the high point, at the point of attack, trying to go after the ball. There really aren't a ton of ball skills for this guy, but he's very good in coverage, and he does his job as a cornerback, minus all of the pick sixes and swatting the ball down and the flashing, that kind of thing. But he's a very strong man cover corner, which is one of the reasons why I think this Titans team, looking for man corners, looking for press corners, he absolutely fits that bill. Did it a ton in college. I think that he'll compete for starting level snaps in the NFL wherever he goes, and it wouldn't shock me if he ended up being a Titan in round 2 or round 3.
Let's move on to your 10 through 6 picks here. Do you want to run down your bottom half of your top 10?
Yeah, so the 10 through 6 for me, I've got Darius Rush out of South Carolina, as well as Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Both of these fellas at 10 and at 9, respectively. Then I've got Keely Ringo out of Georgia at my cornerback 8 slot, who I've been higher on this entire process than most. I've been beaten into submission, moving him down further than I probably would have 2 months ago, but I still think that he's going to be a good NFL pro. Then a guy that I'm higher on the most, although I think the consensus is finally coming around to this, a guy that we were put on to with, I think, our very first draft only episode back when we did players that are over and underrated with James Foster 2+ months ago. It's Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami, who is a stud, and I think he's firmly within that future Titans warning area. Could absolutely see them taking him. And then finally, who I consider to be the best slot corner in this class with a bullet, Clark Phillips III out of Utah at cornerback 6.
All right, let's start with your bottom 2 here, since they go to the same school. Let's start with Darius Rush. He is kind of cornerback 2 on that team, of course, behind Cam Smith. Someone we talked to actually a little bit at the combine, most notably because I was putting on my hat that went wee woo perfect Titan alert, because of how much he loved to talk about how he plays special teams. This man loves to play special teams and goes hard in the paint on special teams. So there's something that this guy's going to do. He's going to be good on punt return and kickoffs. Darius Rush
to Mike Vrabel's ear right there.
Exactly. He comes in at 6'2", 198. No wingspan on him, but his arm length is 33 3/8. Pretty speedy guy. 4.36 40, which is in the 92nd percentile, but his vertical jump and broad jump weren't exactly the best. Both are below the 50th percentile. What do you like about Darius Rush?
So Darius Rush is a guy that the more I've watched him, the more I've kind of fallen in love for him. What he lacks in tackling and off coverage ability, and there is a good bit of not concern on tape, but just like you don't see a lot of polish there. That's the area of his game that is most unrefined. But what he lacks in that tackling department and the off coverage department, he makes up for with fantastic fluidity, length, speed. He's more on the developmental side of things, and that's why I have him below the cornerback one of the South Carolina squad last year, Cam Smith, who's a more refined talent to me. But the reason why he's more developmental is because this guy was a receiver that came into college as a receiver and then was transitioned over to play the opposite side of the ball as a defensive back. He's got no serious injury history. Titans need DBs that can stay healthy, obviously. And his ceiling, in theory, is much higher than he ever sniffed in college, seeing as he's really new to the position, right? There's always some intrigue involved in guys that haven't played their position except for a handful of years in college. You see that a lot with guys that get transferred over. And the wonder there is, the allure of it is, man, they've, in terms of skills specific to this position, they've not spent a ton of time refining those skills, going to camps as a middle schooler to learn how to be a better cornerback or whatever it may be. Like, this guy might continue to get better and better. And from an athletic profile standpoint, like you mentioned, 6'2", 198 pounds, ran a 4.36. Like I mentioned, fluid, lengthy, speedy. He has all the traits you're looking for in a starting man corner in the NFL. And I think for the Titans in particular, I would have a very hard time being upset if they ended up with Darius Rush on like a day 3. I think day 2 would absolutely be a little rich for my blood. But if they got him in the 3rd round, did I say day 3? I mean 3rd round, end of day 2. That is where I think he should go, and he'll probably be a good pro. He just may take a year or two to really flash.
Yeah, Darius Rush comes in as the 12th consensus cornerback, 81 on the board.
Okay.
Overall, let's go to his teammate Cam Smith here. Comes in on the consensus board, the 35th prospect overall, the 6th cornerback on the board here. Cam Smith's measurables are nothing really to look at. He's not going to beat you with his athletic frame. He comes in at 6 foot, 180 pounds, which is 8th percentile for cornerbacks, 76 1/8 wingspan, 40-yard dash, 4.43, just pretty fine. But what does stick out with him is how he sees the game. We talked about this at the combine. He's someone he's probably one of the smartest cornerbacks in this draft class. He sees the game as if he was the defensive coordinator. And he plays the game as if he is watching the play unfold. He's not someone that's just going to go up there and beat you with his strength or his athleticism. He's going to beat you with his knowledge of the game.
Yeah, he's a guy that is kind of confusing to see on a lot of these lists because of that frame. You mentioned around 180 pounds, a half inch over 6 foot, not the craziest wingspan in the world. As compared to his college teammate, Darius Rush, you're wondering, why is this guy the better cornerback again? But like you mentioned, he's just so polished. This is a guy that spent his entire life refining his skills as a cornerback. And he's an explosive enough athlete, despite his frame, to kind of live on an island. He's got long enough arms that he can drape all over you, get on your hips, make you not quite hit all the marks in your route, get you off your spot, the things that a good cornerback does in the NFL. Now, his physicality that he uses to compensate for that lack of physical size sometimes gets him in trouble with penalties. And like, if you're looking for a knock, that could be a concern. He could be an easy mark for referees because of that way that he's forced to play. His technique is very good. There are a handful of things where his technique's kind of wild and confusing, and you wonder, like, is that just him compensating for lack of size? Is that him, it didn't necessarily not work the way that he approaches some elements of the game, but it's certainly not the way that, they teach it. So you're kind of confused by that. He has all the talent, both between the ears and in his explosiveness, his agility, all of those things that he uses to compensate for the lack of size to be a long-time NFL starter. I think that he's somebody that is going to come in and on day one be contending for a starting job in the NFL, both inside and out. I think that size and the size and skill combo gives him true inside-out versatility that is very valuable in the NFL. So I think that he's going to be a good scheme fit for a lot of teams.
Next up, someone that you have said multiple times you're way higher on than a lot of other people is Kelee Ringo, the corner out of Georgia. Kelee Ringo comes in just behind Cam Smith at the 38th best prospect, consensus corner number 7 on the board here. He is a guy that's bigger than a couple of the other guys on this list, 6'1", 207 pounds, which is both 90th percentile or better. His wingspan is a little smaller than you would like at 74 1/8 inches, but dude's a speedster, 4.3, 640 at the combine. He was part of that group that was just really, really fast and kind of came out of that cornerback and safety days. Wow, these guys can fly. What do you like about Kelee Ringo?
So I like all the measurements for sure. You said almost 6'2". He actually measured 6'2" at his pro day, around 205, 210 in that area. He's got long enough arms, long enough wingspan, under 4'4". He's a 4'3" guy. He's got all the necessary measurements. Now, he's a projection when you're watching the tape, because as we've mentioned numerous times, pretty much every time we talk about a Georgia defender, that team is such uniquely positioned to play football truly as an all-star team. Like, they've got NFL caliber players at most every position that they're able to, against lesser talent in college, play in a way where they don't have to really uncork the full versatility, the full ability, the full range of talent that they have on that roster very often. And there are times where you see guys that were Georgia defenders that, were kind of kept within their box in college, get to the NFL, and you're like, man, why didn't they get unleashed in college? It's because they didn't need to be. Like, that's just the way that Georgia's able to operate. So it's difficult to really know what the true ceiling for these guys are when you're watching the tape, because they're surrounded by so much talent. That being said, his technique is kind of lacking. He's certainly going to be an outside guy. I don't think that he's got the size speed that you want for an outside guy. I don't think he's got the agility, the quickness, the burst, the shiftiness, the stickiness, maybe is the right word for it, to play on the inside super effectively. But that size speed blend is something that defensive coordinators look at and see as a total ball of clay that they can mold into what they want it to be. Is a freaky and competitive athlete from an outside corner perspective. The results were kind of uneven early in his career, but that's not shocking. He's got enough talent ultimately to start in the NFL. I think that he'll push for starting reps right away, playing at a big time school, playing against big time competition, both in the SEC and within his own squad. I can see this guy getting looks as a cornerback or even as a safety, frankly, at that size and with that range to play in the NFL in his first year.
Next up here, your number 7 cornerback on the board here is Tyreek Stevenson, the corner out of the University of Miami. He's a guy that transferred from Georgia after his first year, played 2 full years.
Couldn't hang, man. Bad player. Get him out of here.
He played 2 full years with the Miami Hurricanes. He comes in at the consensus corner 11, pick number 71 overall, which just goes to show you how deep this class is, that there's 11 in the top 75, and Darius Rush is just right outside of there at 81. His measurables come in at 6 foot, even 198 pounds. No wingspan for him listed, but he did run a pretty decent 40-yard dash with a 4.45. What do you like about him? You said that he's someone that, as we had on yesterday, James Foster has kind of brought to light as this is a guy to watch that could maybe skyrocket up some boards.
Yeah, he's the first guy we've had on this list that is going to, in the NFL, I think, be a bona fide press man corner, a perimeter guy. He's got NFL starting ability, absolutely. Very athletic. He's got the speed and the short area bursts, the short area agility to work, I think, both inside and out if you want. From a body type standpoint, he's got that versatile frame at 6 foot, right around 6 foot, right around 200 pounds. So you could use him in a number of ways on the defense. He needs to be more disciplined. Like in coverage, on the tape, there are times when it just busts and it does not work. And it's because he's not disciplined with, if he's working in man coverage, or particularly if he's working in zone, staying home, staying true to his assignment, making sure that he's staying on his guy and not trying to cheat the run or the play action, or too worried about getting beat underneath and ultimately getting beat over the top. Like it's those kind of concerns on tape that give you a little bit of pause. But from a raw talent standpoint, like the highlights, it's there. This guy's got it. I think he's going to be a good NFL starter. I think that he's come up the boards by like 100 spots in the past 2 or 3 weeks, and for good reason. I think this guy's going to come into the league and within a year or two be a starter for somebody.
Next up at number 6, your combine darling here, Clark Phillips the third.
I like me some Clark, man.
He comes in at the cornerback consensus 10, pick 61 overall. You're going to have to go to bat for him because what we've been talking about so far, he does not fit that bill. He comes in at 5'9", 184 pounds, an arm length of 29 1/8. That's a first percentile for cornerbacks. And his 40-yard dash here isn't anything to crave over either. He comes in at a 4.51.
You were struggling 40. For a word there and went with crave. I like that.
I know. Yeah, it's hard out here talking about these guys.
It worked, but yeah. We've gotten to the point where we've officially run our draft thesauruses thin. Like we're having to recycle words. There's just not enough. There's not enough different descriptive words for these guys. But were you done? I'm sorry. I didn't.
Yeah, I'm done. What do you? Being one of the smaller corners.
So let me explain why I'm high on him. Right. So the explanation is as simple as he's a slot only guy. He is he's the Jedi of the slot, like it was often referred to in discussion of Elijah Molden when he came out in 2020 for the Titans out of Washington. He's a guy that absolutely is going to be slot only because of those size and length limitations. But as a bona fide slot defensive back, like this dude's got it all. Doesn't have the elite size or speed that you need to limit the big plays, but the athleticism, short area quickness, short area burst, ability to adjust and compensate, make up for mistakes in the short to intermediate range. He's got all of that on tape. It's really crazy impressive how well he's able to play kind of within a phone booth, and the instincts are all there. He's very developed from a mental standpoint, from a polished standpoint. He's somebody that's going to come in and, despite the limitations with size and the role, while he's not the most versatile in the world, he's going to be more NFL ready than most. And a lot of the reasons why we saw Elijah Molden play all of 2020 for the Titans and be one of, I think, the number 1 graded PFF rookie cornerback that year, like had a really good season. Clark Phillips absolutely can come and do the same thing in year 1. If he stays healthy, he'll be a, not a gadget guy, but a toolsy guy that is used in a very specific role for a team, but does it very well.
All right. Do you want to run down now your top 5 corners in this NFL draft? Who do you have at number 5?
So my cornerback 5 is a guy we talked about a good bit yesterday, so we won't spend a ton of time on him today, but we'll cover the highlights. It's Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. He's the highest graded guy, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's the highest caliber cornerback, according to the consensus board at least, the Titans have had direct contact with that we're aware of.
He'd be right behind Deonte Banks.
Okay, so they've talked to Banks. Thank you. So it's he and Banks that are kind of in that consensus top 5 cornerback area that they have talked to. And if either of these guys are there at 41 and the Titans are just going best player available, you could totally see either of them going to the Titans. So I think Emmanuel Forbes is a very good cornerback, even though he is flat Stanley and in fact a 2D human being. So he's my cornerback 5 out of Mississippi State. Then we got Joey Porter Jr. at 4 out of Penn State, who is one of the consensus top 3 guys, considered to be a lock first rounder. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Maybe we talk a little bit more about that tomorrow with my final mock draft episode when that comes out. But I think that he is a first round corner. I just don't see him as better than my number 3, who is Deonte Banks out of Maryland, who is the best. I think it was James Foster who tweeted this out like in December when nobody but he and the draft nicks of the world are considering the prospects in this year's class. He tweeted out some highlights of Deonte Banks and said Deonte Banks is the best cornerback you've never heard of because he plays for Maryland and nobody watches Maryland football. He's a stud, and the more you watch of him, the more you fall in love, I promise. And then Devin Witherspoon is my cornerback 2 out of Illinois. He's kind of really 1A he's kind of the 1B to my 1A. My 1A is Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. it's truly a matter of Christian, and we'll talk about this when we get to cover them here in a second in more detail, but Christian Gonzalez is he's more physically appetizing, and Devin Witherspoon is more tape appetizing. If you're somebody that values the tape more, Devin's your guy, because he had what is very easily argued the best cornerback season in the history of college football last year. Like, truly a rookie Sauce Gardner level performance, and then Christian Gonzalez from a prototypical cornerback standpoint was made in a lab with his measurements. So those are my guys, 5 through 1: Emmanuel Forbes, Joey Porter Jr., Deonte Banks, Devin Witherspoon, and Christian Gonzalez.
Before we break them down here, I just got to say, no love for my man DJ Turner.
Yeah, so I noticed this on your board. I do. Let's pause here. I want to hear your thoughts on DJ Turner. I like him a lot. He would have been one of the first, if I'd done a top 20, he would have been 11, 12, somewhere right in there. But what do you see in this guy that makes him a bona fide top? You have him at your cornerback 6.
I do. It's kind of the same argument you have for Emmanuel Forbes. Okay. I do with DJ Turner. Like, I feel like what you're going to say is his weight is just like not what you want to see from him, and it's not. He comes in at 178. He's a little bit undersized at 5'11", but the dude, his athleticism is maybe top 3 in this class. I think if you look at his measurements, I mean, he had a 99th percentile 40 time. He ran a 4.26 at the combine. His broad jump 131, which is his 91st percentile. Vertical jump 38.5.
If we're going based on combine athleticism, he is a top 3 guy in this class. He killed it at the combine.
He's a guy that I'm just, once again, he's my one guy that we always have on these lists that I'm betting on the traits here versus the tape. I don't think his tape was all that impressive.
It wasn't, but if traits are any indication.
If there were like half of the cornerbacks that are as good as him not coming out this year, like, he probably would be a top 3 corner, but it's just so deep. I can see why he gets pushed down. But the dude's just an athletic freak. Unlike Trey Tomlinson.
Yeah. Sorry, Dorito lover. We don't have any Dorito love for Trey Tomlinson. If you want to hear why, we talked about it on yesterday's show. So go listen.
Yeah. But he's a guy that I'm just betting on the traits.
Oh my gosh. I've been on different screens on if you're watching with us on YouTube, which you should be, I just realized the sun is creeping across the back of my green screen. I'll just kind of let it because it feels nice, the nice radiance on my skin, but just ignore the blind shaped spotlight in the background. That is in fact the sun in the sky. So it'll be all right. Let's talk top 5 guys, and Emmanuel Forbes is up first.
Yeah, so of course we talked about him a lot yesterday. James was not as high on Emmanuel Forbes as you were.
Guess who's not here anymore? So he did nobody to. I can only defend him. Oh well.
He comes in at 6 foot and 3/4, which is 70 percentile, 166 pounds, which is a big fat 0% for all cornerbacks.
We love a good 0th percentile.
4.3, 5.40. So he is a fast dude. His vertical and broad jump are both above average, ranging in the 60th percentile for cornerbacks. The big argument against him is that he's an outlier at his size.
Flat Stanley, man. He is. He's a 2D human being at nearly sub 165. At the combine, he weighed 166, put on 4 pounds for his pro day to get into that 170 range. But he is certainly a slender dude because he's not short, right? At his combine, he measured 6'1" at his pro day, rather. At the combine, he measured just under 6'1". So imagine, like, here's context, right? I'm 5'8", 205, right in there. Certainly not an athlete, not an NFL player, but a pretty standard short dude. This guy weighs like 35 pounds less than me, and yet he's 5 inches taller than me. So take my frame, stretch it out 5 inches, and then lop off like an arm's worth of weight. And then you've got this dude. That is how slender and skinny he is. And when you look at him, we saw him in Indianapolis, like, whoa, he looks all of 165. He turns sideways and kind of disappears because he's 2D. If you ignore the rail thin build, the rail thin frame, and just watch the tape, and you notice that on tape, but in football pads, he's just a cornerback. He's a slender dude. This guy is super aggressive, sometimes over aggressive in his tendencies, but in terms of production, ball production, 35 passes defensed in 3 years in college, 14 interceptions. I can't find this stat right off the top of my head, but I mentioned it yesterday. I believe he led the SEC in pick sixes over the last 2 seasons. I think he had like 6 of them, which is insanity. So he's a pick six threat, kind of like a he's like a much skinnier but better at being an actual cornerback version of a particular Dallas Cowboys cornerback that we've all grown to either love or hate. But that's kind of the mold that I see him playing, being a stud production cornerback. The biggest question, honestly, for me is he going to, stay healthy? I'm not super concerned based on the tape. And he's playing in the SEC, so he's playing NFL caliber wide receiver talent. I'm not super concerned with him getting pushed around a ton. Like, there were times when it was like, yeah, you can see he can't hang in terms of size. You don't want him having to cover AJ Brown or DK Metcalf in the NFL. But as long as he's not just getting bullied out there, I don't think that that's a concern for him as much as just, is he going to stay healthy? If he stays healthy, I think this guy is absolutely a bona fide NFL starter. I think he's like a guy that's worthy of a second contract. Whether he stays healthy or not is a big question. That's why he's not higher for me. But everything that I've seen and heard, and getting to talk to him at the combine, getting to understand his demeanor, getting to hear from scouts who like his football character is through the roof. This guy, if you're willing to overlook the slightness, he is a very, very good player. For reference on how good he is, by the way, if you're a fan of Dan Brugler and the beast that he puts out at The Athletic, which if you like the draft and you can't not be a fan of that, if you read through it, Dan Brugler very rarely curses in his thing. And his final sentence on Manuel Forbes, which I just pulled up, he says, NFL teams willing to overlook the slight demeanor will find a damn good player. That's not the kind of thing that very milquetoast Dan Brugler is thrown out there. He likes this guy. And for reference, he's got Emmanuel Forbes as his cornerback 5. So I guess Dan Brugler and I are on the same page, at least when it comes to Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State.
Next up with the next 4, we're going to get into the guys who have probably more than a 60% chance to go in the first round. Like,
3 of these 4 guys are absolutely going in the first.
And
I'd say like a 60% chance all 4 go. Yeah.
Next up on your board here is Joey Porter Jr., the cornerback out of, I believe, Penn State. Joey Porter Jr. comes in at cornerback 3, 14th prospect overall on the consensus board. He's got the height and he's got the wingspan here, 6'2.5" inches tall, 80 and 7/8% inches wingspan.
We're doing eighths of percentages now.
Yeah,
we're doing, when the draft has gone too far, man.
The numbers, Mason, what do they mean? But
what do they mean?
Weight 193. So he comes in just above average in the weight department. What do you like about Joey Porter Jr., who has been talked about as maybe the best press corner in this draft?
Yeah, and if you're looking for a great press corner, this is your dude. He's going to be a good corner in the NFL. He had an awesome season at Penn State last year, which now I want to remind myself of his stats. Yeah, in 2022, he had 27 tackles, 11 passes defensed. Like, this guy, double-digit passes defended is a big-time deal in college. That's, he almost had 1 a game. And I don't know if you know this about cornerbacks, but when you're the best guy on your team by a lot, typically teams don't target you much. But he was targeted enough to have a double-digit passes defended. From a size standpoint, like you mentioned, he is the prototypical press man corner. Super long, super lengthy, incredibly long athlete. And there is some potential, like, the reason why I have him for JT, honestly, is the more I've read up on him and looked into the draft musings of folks who I trust their opinion on these things, like the Dan Bruglers of the world and among others, they talk about how if there is a top corner in this class that has some true bust potential, it may be Porter Jr. simply because of the fact that he's got some undisciplined tape. He's not the most disciplined stylistically. He's changed direction, kind of unbalanced at times. It's a matchup question in the NFL that is hard to not like because of that aggressive length and the quickness that he possesses and the athleticism. He's going to present a matchup challenge for receivers that, well, frankly, a lot of the receivers that come out of this draft class who just don't have a ton of size. But if he is able to clean up some of the polish questions when it comes to his play style, he is total classic bump and run cornerback. If he's in the right scheme, he could be a slam dunk, but he is kind of scheme dependent. So I like him a lot. But if there was one of these top 5 guys, you told me one of these guys is a bust in the NFL, it might be Joey Porter Jr. I think there's also something to be said about the fact that this dude might get drafted higher than he should simply because of his name. Like, ooh, dad was an NFL athlete. Let's draft the junior version. And oftentimes that works. Like, typically genetics play a decent role in how athletic you are. But if he was not Joey Porter Jr., if he was some random cornerback who had a really good college career, would he be considered a top 3 guy in this class? I don't know. Sometimes I ask myself that.
So move on to your cornerback 3 here, Deonte Banks.
Oh, yeah.
He is the 4th corner on the consensus board, 20th prospect overall. He comes in at 6 foot flat, 197 pounds, ran a 4.35 40 at the combine. What do you like about this guy?
So with Deonte Banks, he's somebody that, again, you don't know who this guy is because he played Maryland football, and nobody watches Maryland football. Not even folks in Maryland, frankly. He's a stud. Okay, 9 passes defensed last season, had an interception. He's also a decent tackler, had 38 tackles on the season. If there was a knock on him, and the reason why I don't have him above our top 2 guys, outside of the fact that from a physical standpoint, he does not contend with our top 2 guys, in my opinion. His play style is also somewhat undisciplined. His technique, he doesn't quite trust sometimes. His footing, the size, you can tell he sometimes feels mismatched when he's not really being mismatched. He's got the size, he's got the athletic ability, the physicality to be an NFL starter. So if he can just kind of trust his technique, trust his training, polish a handful of things in his game. I'm looking at some of the notes. His technique against NFL caliber receivers sometimes gets thrown to the wind because it just gets a little panicky sometimes. Like his hips turn too often, like things that he just rushes the process. When if he'd stayed within rhythm, if he stayed within himself, played within himself, he would have been better off. But if he just gets rid of some of those inconsistencies, some of those jitters, the nervous energy, like this guy can absolutely be an NFL style or NFL caliber cornerback. He's definitely going to be projected more to be he's going to be a press man style guy, outside corner. He's got some upside in terms of zone ability. I think he's going to be a better, more versatile outside corner than a guy like Joey Porter Jr. I think he'll be able to play press or zone pretty well. And so he'll probably fit into more schemes. That's part of the reason why I would not be surprised if Joey Porter slipped and you saw a guy like Banks come into the first round, simply because you have to consider how many of these teams, of the 31 teams picking the first round, how many of them even have a guy like Joey Porter Jr. on their board if they only consider him as a press man corner. Maybe they don't need maybe they want, a guy that isn't in that mold in the first round, or they just don't see him as a talent worthy of taking that because it doesn't fit their scheme. Whereas with a guy like Deonte Banks, I think he may fit better for some teams. And so that's why he's my cornerback 3.
And of course, the final 2 here, Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon. You can't really talk about one without talking about the other here.
Oh, yeah.
You have them ranked Gonzalez 1, Witherspoon 2, but you said it's more of a 1A, 1B type of situation here.
Yeah.
Devin Witherspoon is ranked cornerback 1 on the board. Christian Gonzalez is ranked 2, although their overalls are prospect 5 and 6 respectively. Let's run down both of their measurements here, and then we can just kind of talk about them to wrap up the show here. Christian Gonzalez, first of all, comes in at 6'1" 3/8", 197 pounds with a 76 7/8 wingspan. He ran a 4.38 40 at the combine, whereas Devin Witherspoon comes in at 5'11" and a half, 181 pounds and 73 5/8 inch wingspan.
Yeah, so the thing about him that is surprising when you just look on paper, it's like, okay, top 2 cornerbacks, like probably prototypical size and speed and weight and all of these things. No, right? He's 180. He's under 6 foot. He does have unusually good length, and that's part of the reason why he's a successful corner. Like, a guy that almost has a 74-inch wingspan typically isn't coming in under 6 foot, but he does have that. And then, like you mentioned, he possesses that low 4.4 speed and a really nice 10-yard split. So he's got both the short area burst and quickness. He's quick and he's fast at his top speed. The thing about him that makes him a top 2 guy to me, JT, is 2 things. One, on tape, he's undeniably the best tape of any corner in this class. He had, like I mentioned, arguably the best cornerback season in the history of college football. Dude was absolutely shut down, was incredible. 3 interceptions, 17 passes defended, 41 tackles. Pound for pound, he's incredibly feisty. He gets himself in trouble sometimes playing a little bit too aggressive, because we mentioned this with some of the other smaller guys. There's some concern there in terms of, well, smaller cornerback playing feisty, playing physical. They may be a mark for drawing some fouls in the NFL. But if he can play within himself and keep that fiery play style contained a little bit, he's got the ultimate scheme versatility, partially because of his size, partially despite his size. Like, this is a guy that I expect to be on the board, being considered a guy for maybe all of the teams. I don't see him not working. You could play him inside, you could play him outside. He's good in zone, he's good in man, he's good in press. He's got it all in terms of what you're looking for from a cornerback and scheme versatility. So that's why he projects to be an immediate NFL starter. Here's a quote, by the way, in some of the notes that I think I stole this. I either stole it from PFF or the Beast, I believe, but his former head coach, Lovie Smith, former NFL head coach, by the way, the reason why the Bears had the first overall pick as a little gift to the city of Houston. Lovie Smith has had this quote about him that I wrote down: probably the toughest guy on the team, pound for pound. No one competes harder than him. You don't usually hear that about the defensive back, and you definitely don't usually hear that about the under 6 foot, 180 pound defensive back. But the dude's a dog. He's just kind of built that way. And I think in interviews, he's going to kill it. I think teams are going to fall in love with him as a person as well as a player. That's why I think he's going to be a stud when he gets drafted. I would be shocked if it's not within the top 15 picks. I'm expecting it to be top 10.
Yeah, for sure. I think Devin Witherspoon is my number one. I think we have those flip-flopped. He's a guy that I've been going back and forth on this entire process. I think we
both think both of these guys, like, they're both going to be studs.
I've been going back and forth on him because there's another prospect named Christian Gonzalez who's just as good.
And from a measurement standpoint, like, if you're wanting the eye candy from a combine, like, show me the body on this guy, as all of us draft nerds are like a little bit suspiciously into size and shape, length, height, weight, all of those things. But listen, big guys win in the NFL. That's the way it works. You got to know what the tools people are working with. And Christian Gonzalez has got the tools in spades. Yeah,
for sure. And I think that's going to wrap up our top 10 list. Yeah.
We haven't talked about Gonzalez.
That's what I just
I know, but we didn't. Did you mention, am I dumb? Did you mention his measurements?
I did.
Did you literally already mention his measurements?
Yeah,
are you
did.
Positive?
I
must have totally tuned you out. Okay, so for my sake, let me really repeat them, because they are important, right? 200 pounds, 6'1.5", that wingspan, almost 77 inches long. Like this, if you're a Titans fan listening to this show, and it's rare. It's almost like seeing Sasquatch. You've ever seen Caleb Farley in person? Anyone that covers him or has seen him at a game, or has seen him at training camp or whatever, has said. And I said this at my first ever training camp as media this past August. Holy cow, I've never seen a longer athlete in my life than Caleb Farley. That's the reason why he was a first round caliber cornerback. And if he hadn't gotten hurt, he'd been a top 10 guy like Christian Gonzalez, who is a top 10 guy probably because of the fact that he is crazy long and crazy athletic. And he's got the size, weight, speed combo. He's a 4.3 guy in terms of 40-yard dash. Under 155, 10-yard split. He's quick and he's speedy. He's just got it all. Now, he's not as versatile as a guy like Devin Witherspoon. And that's why, if you were JT, it sounds like you agree, but like, if you had to tell me one of these guys, one of these guys goes in the top 10, the other guy falls into like the 13th or 14th pick, who are you guessing go? I think it's much more likely, just in terms of teams that are going to covet their versatility. I think there's going to be more teams interested in a Witherspoon than a Gonzalez in the top 10, but maybe you disagree.
No, I agree. I think if there's one that's going to fall out, I think Christian Gonzalez is a guy who sneaks into maybe the 10 to 15 range.
Right. And the reason why I think that is because he's significantly less versatile, and I think less teams are going to be interested in him. That being said, he's not going to be a great zone coverage corner, but his man cover ability, the talent with that speed and that size is fantastic. Super fluid movement. He's got the length to just blanket pretty much any outside receiver, and the size to not get bullied in that way. Super high-end traits, kind of similar to a Jeff Okudah. Maybe that's the reason why folks, because I don't know if you noticed this, JT, for like the first 2 months of draft process, it was like the lock of the top 10 was, the Lions are going Christian Gonzalez. Like they're
Yeah.
Duh. They, especially once they got rid of Jeff Okudah, shipped his butt down to Atlanta. It's like, well, now they're definitely drafting him. And then in the last month or so, it's been, what are you talking about? The Lions are definitely drafting Devin Witherspoon. Of course, that's a lock. Every mock draft you find today has them going with Devin Witherspoon if they go cornerback. I think that's because maybe he's a little too similar to Jeff Okudah, and you see teams avoid the ghosts of their past so they don't accidentally make the same mistake twice. But he trusts himself. He trusts his talent in man coverage, in press coverage. He's got all the makings of a future Pro Bowler. So he's a stud, and I think he's going to go in the top 15 picks. And I think both he and Witherspoon are, of the entire draft class, not just cornerbacks, they're two of the top 5-10 guys I'm most confident will, A, be a starter this season, and B, end up being, at worst, good NFL players.
And that's going to do it for our top 10 cornerback list.
Yeah. How about I run down right before we get out of here? I'll repeat the list for everybody as we've done with the other top 10. So my honorable mention was Julius Brents. And then my cornerback 10 was Darius Rush out of South Carolina. Cornerback 9, his teammate Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Cornerback 8 out of Georgia, Keely Ringo. 7 out of Miami, Tyreek Stevenson. 6 out of Utah, Clark Phillips III. Cornerback 5 is the flat Stanley man himself, Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. Cornerback 4 is Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. Cornerback 3, Deontay Banks out of Maryland. Cornerback 2, Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois. And my cornerback 1 is Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. JT, we have done, was that 12 position group, 11 or 12 position groups, 10 guys in every position group. So we have talked at length about the top, 110, 120
That's
guys,
and then probably honorable mentions,
and then probably like 200 more guys we've mentioned on top of that on this pod. So I think we have truly, some congratulations are in order, sir, because I think we have truly covered the entire draft in terms of people worth talking about, all the way from round 1 to round 7 at every single position. We didn't neglect the lesser positional groups this year, like some folks had the audacity to make fun of us for. How dare we start our positional series with the linebackers and the safeties? Well, that's because they're not great groups, but guess what? We're showing love to everybody and we're covering them all, and we did that. So if you are listening to this show and you enjoyed today's show, or you enjoyed the idea, but you're like, I don't care about the cornerbacks, I'm a Titans fan, give me offense. Guess what, baby? We got top 10 at every single position, not kickers, not special teams, but everything else, every position from the past, all within the last month, I think the last 3 weeks, JT. So go back in the catalog, find your favorite position or the position you're interested in. We talk like we did today at length, 5-10 minutes on each one of the top 10 guys in this class, explain why he is or isn't going to be a stud, talk often about whether or not they're going to be a great potential Titan or not. So that is a great resource. And we are done for today. JT, we just have one more show to do until we're live. We got a cold one in our hands, maybe a little pizza or something on the other hand. Laptop sitting in front of us, in front of a camera. Got ESPN up on the TV, and we are live covering the draft, which I'm giddy like a kid before Christmas. Cannot wait for that. Excited. Just crossing my fingers. Honestly, the only thing that I hope for is entertain me, man. I want chaos. I want madness. If that means teams are having to trade a ton, cool. If everybody sticks and picks in the top 31 picks, I think it still has the opportunity for the board to fall in the weirdest possible way and still be incredibly exciting. So cannot wait for that. Again, everybody needs to tune in on Thursday night and Friday night. I believe the draft starts at 7 p.m. Central Time on Thursday night. So round 1, we'll probably start around 6:30 Central. Get ready. Field any questions, let everybody get in, just kind of chill and get ready. And you should get there first, JT. We talked about this yesterday. If you're sitting there like, okay, draft starts at 7, Titans at 11, I'll tune in at 8, 8:15. Dangerous idea, man. This is the team that might trade up to 3, 5, 2, 7. Who knows? If they're going to get a quarterback, Titans could be on the board in the first 10 seconds of this draft, and you better be there from the start if you want to catch all of the action. So we'll be reacting to all of that. Last thing we have to mention, once again, like we did at the top of the show, our article, the do and don't draft prospects of the 2023 NFL draft. Truly, JT and I is the closest thing besides our audio catalog, where we've done the top 10 guys at every position, as well as a number of different draft topics in the past 2 months. This is our, in written form, closest thing to a Titans draft guide. You really could call it a Titans draft guide because that's the way that we approached it for every round, every position of need. We've got 70 players in this article where we've got detailed write-ups as to whether or not you should or should not be rooting for the Titans to pick them up in the 3 days at the end of this week, and why or why not. So check that out. It will be available on BroadwaySportsMedia.com later tonight. In just a couple of hours. So make sure to check on that, and you'll, I'm sure, see it all over our social media. And I think that covers all of our things. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Hope that you're subscribed to the show. If you're not, please go and subscribe wherever you get good podcasts, wherever you get your YouTube videos, which I guess happens on YouTube. So go to Broadway Sports Media on YouTube and subscribe there. And with that, we'll be back tomorrow. Last episode that we've got pre-recorded before the live shows. It is my mock draft 3.0. My top 31, first 31 picks I'll be mocking, as well as a 7-round Titans mock. So make sure to be there for that. And until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. We'll talk to you tomorrow, and then we'll talk to you live on Thursday night for the first round of the NFL draft.